Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Speak Out, a very special online tribe meetup. I am Isa Calzado, one of the co-founders of She Talks Asia, and today we are teaming up with Avon Philippines to address a very serious problem. While the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown the world into a crisis, there is another silent pandemic that's being buried: domestic violence. The quarantine, though much needed to stop the spread of the virus, has inadvertently trapped many women at home with their abusers, with limited resources and means of getting out. It is an alarming and urgent situation, and that is why She Talks Asia and Avon have joined forces to shine a light on this silent pandemic. And of course, to be able to reach out to the millions of women who may need our help and encourage everyone to speak out about this. We've invited a few distinguished women guests here today to talk about what we as a community can do to contribute in stopping this from happening, because we all have the power to do so. Now, before we go to our panel discussion, I will be talking to one of the strongest, most inspiring women that I know, a friend of mine. And of course, she is not only my friend, she is known as an actress, host, somewhat larger than life personality when you think about her. A glamorous personality, but also one of the nicest and most humble people that I know. And she is also an Avon ambassador in the fight against violence against women and girls. Today, she continuously rallies against violence and shares her inspiring and empowering learnings. We are honored to have her share her personal story with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rufa Gutierrez.
Hi, Isa. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I was already emotional just listening to you. It is my first time here on She Talks Asia. I started following the account already, and I'm very excited to learn more and how you guys are able to empower women all over the world.
Thank you. We were just following your lead, Rufa. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank you for being here today on behalf of She Talks Asia. It's our first time to partner on a project, and I hope it won't be the last. And please allow me to just honor this conversation. The fact that you are opening up, though it is not the first time. Every time you talk about this, I'm sure it is not something that is easy to just talk about with anybody. But we admire you for your courage. We admire you for speaking out. And you, like I said, you are truly an inspiration to all of us. So thank you again for this time.
Well, I would also like to thank Avon. I've been an Avon ambassador against violence, domestic violence, and also violence against women and girls. I've been with Avon for 11 years. So thank you so much, Avon, for inviting me to do this talk today with She Talks Asia and Isa.
Definitely. Thank you again. So you talked about it. We verbalized it. Speaking out. I don't want to talk about the details already of what happened. I think today I would like to understand and know what made you decide to speak out.
Well, I got married for love. It was a fairy tale wedding. It was a fairy tale relationship from the very beginning. There were some signs, even when we weren't married yet, that he could be abusive. But I kind of thought that it was like, oh, he's just jealous. Nagsiselos lang yan because I'm so far. It was a long distance relationship. And that basically carried on into our marriage, because you always want to think that people change. But Isa, you know what? People don't change. It just gets worse over time. And for me, I guess the turning point of why I shared my story, why I was able to speak out, and why I was able to leave this abusive relationship was because I know I still have a bright future. I was only 30, 31, 32, and I was thinking to myself, "Ito na ba yun? Is this what I'm going to be living for the rest of my life?"
Yeah.
And I miss my family. I miss my friends. I miss my career. So, I just took that step, and I shared it with friends, and then I prayed. When you're in that situation, you just pray so hard that someone will listen, that someone will help you, because I was very scared. I got married to a very powerful man, and I was alone in Istanbul, and I was afraid that if I share my story to anyone, they might kill me or something might happen to me. Every time we talk about this story, it's still very emotional for me, and it's very fresh. Sometimes you want to just erase the past and you want to forget about it. But when he calls, then I remember the memories, and maybe because he's the father of my 2 girls. So, I think it's because I wanted hope for a better future, hope for myself that, I can be a survivor.
And that you truly are. And as you talk about hope, and you mentioned your 2 girls, was it something that you also wanted for them? When you decided to speak up, like thinking about your 2 girls, was
they
that
were
part
only
of it?
2 and 3. Lorraine and Venice were only 2 and 3 at that time. And I remember when I left, the turning point of the relationship is when I left, and I was carrying them both, running away from my home. And it was actually my in-laws that accepted me, and they were always there for me from the very beginning. We still keep in touch. But I must say, it wasn't only for me, it was also for Lorraine and Venice, because I want them growing up knowing that they're strong women. I want them to be an inspiration to other teenagers, to other girls out there, that abuse is never okay, whether it's in the form of physical, verbal, financial, mental distress. It's not okay. So I want them to find loving husbands one day, God-fearing individuals that will take care of them spiritually and not touch them. That's why I also reached that decision back then. This was in 2007, 8, and 9, Isa.
Yeah.
So that was a long time ago, but it still seems like it's yesterday, that it happened yesterday.
Because that's also how, how deep the wounds can get, diba? When it's something like that. And then oftentimes I feel that, when there's trauma, in whatever form, you think you're okay, and then suddenly it just takes one trigger. And that's why I said earlier, I am so grateful that we are having this conversation. And I hope that, this is not for you naman lang eh. I mean, you do this not for you, but you do this so that others will be inspired to speak out. You're inspiring them in the same way you're inspiring your girls.
Well, I would like to give hope, Isa, and help to everyone out there that, there's a bright future for everyone. And the best thing to do is really share your story with someone. And for us, it's best to listen, because we don't know what a woman is going through. And with me, can you imagine, I'm such a strong individual, and you might think that I'm larger than life, and I was scared. So can you imagine other Filipinos out there, who are probably dependable on their husbands, they're depending on financial assistance from their husbands, and they can't break away, they can't break free from that relationship. So for me, pinaka-importante talaga is that you are strong on your own and be financially stable on your own. Just don't rely on your husband. That's why I never went out with a dirty old man. I always followed my heart. I would
it was always for you passion. Passion over
exactly. Gusto kong maging financially stable on my own, di ba? Hindi ko kaya. So, ladies, yan, kailangan magtrabaho tayo. Avon was one of the ones that gave me a chance. Imagine, for 11 years, I was able to take care of my kids on my own. Companies like Avon and all of my other endorsements Maraming salamat for giving me a second chance in life that I'm able to take care of my kids. And you know, a lot of people think that Ilmas gives me money every month. No, he's only sent me $2,000 in the past so many years, which for me, it's not a problem. Kasi kung kaya ko naman silang buhayin on my own, why not, diba? I don't want him to be in control over me. And even my mom said, hayaan mo na siya. Anyway, you can make, you know, your own income by yourself. So I think that's very important, that we're empowered as women.
So I'll backtrack a little bit. I'll go back to, you know, you saying that if it could happen to you, it could happen to anyone. You know, you're financially stable, you're a strong woman, and yet it happened to you. Before you finally spoke out, there must have been several, I don't know how many instances wherein you tried to speak up. So what held you back at that time?
Actually, Isa, in my case, we were married. So when you still love your husband, you won't share what you're going through. You know, you always want to picture a happy family life, you know, that it's perfect, and you try to forgive, you try to forget. And it was very difficult for me to share my story because we had such a big wedding. My parents didn't know. Actually, nobody knew about it except for one friend. And I remember during that time, she told my mom about it, that I was in an abusive relationship. And I got mad at her. Inaway ko siya. And I'm like, it's none of your business. Why are you telling my mom that I'm getting hit? You know, that I'm in an abusive relationship. So I fought with her and I didn't talk to her for a decade. So I guess,
wow.
Yeah, because sabi ko, bakit ka nakikialam? You know, it's my story to tell. If I'm ready, then I will share my story. So I believe that there are women like that also, Isa, that they try to picture themselves in a happy relationship, because you have to remember, most of the time the abuser or your perpetrator is someone that professes his love for you. You know, it's
Publicly.
your husband, your boyfriend, someone that's very close to you, and that's why it's a very difficult going back and forth, especially with your feelings. So it took 5, 6, 7 years, you know, when you reach that point na hindi mo na kaya, you know, you have to take a stand. So with what you said, no, I never shared my story with anyone. It was only my in-laws that knew, and they would always console me and, you know, hug me and say it's okay, because my mother-in-law was also in an abusive relationship. I don't want to say it's their family, but I guess it maybe was their culture. Ayoko naman sabihin na lahat sila, but I think it was a cultural acceptance that happens in relationships, and when you're the wife. Sabi ko nga, parang mas masaya nung naging girlfriend ako, nung naging asawa ako, parang kinulong na lang ako sa bahay. Parang mas masaya na maging girlfriend ka sa culture nila.
Yeah, but you know, you're saying culture nila, but I would say that it happens even here. It happens a lot in the Philippines as well. An ultra macho culture would probably have that kind of would how do I frame this? If you patriarchal society, I guess, an ultra macho society would allow for such instances to be normalized, I guess. So yun yung nakakatakot, diba? And that's why we're talking now, because in this pandemic, kasama ang mga Pilipino na tumaas talaga ang rates ng domestic violence. And you said you finally spoke out, diba? I'm assuming this was no longer that friend too, so because you didn't talk to that friend for 10 years. So who did you finally speak out to? When you had enough, when you really made that decision that I'm speaking out?
Would you believe I didn't speak out until I came to Manila, until I knew I was in the comforts of my home, in my country, and I still didn't tell anyone. Nobody knew why I left Istanbul at that time. You know, ang paalam ko lang is I'm going to go back home. I'm going to finish Philippines Next Top Model. I was a host back then. Didn't tell my family anything that had happened in Istanbul. until I arrived at the airport and they saw that I had marks. So yung mga kakampi ko, yung mga makeup artist ko, dahil sila nagtatago ng mga bugbog ko noon. And I only shared my story when I decided that I was gonna file for annulment, na ayoko na. Kasi pumunta pa siya dito ng twice para i-win back ako. Nagpadala siya ng 10 tickets sa akin at sa mga bata to go back to Istanbul. So as you can see, Isa, it's a very long process. It's not just like, ayoko na, bye. You know, you have to remember, iba pag-asawa mo na Siyempre, you keep on trying, right? So, like what you said earlier, I felt safe in my country. But now we understand that this is happening today because we're in a pandemic and the victims are stuck in their homes with their perpetrators. So, and they have nowhere to go. So, ang may papayo ko sa kanila is really, we should empower the victims to share their story to someone, get help, speak out. But it's easier said than done, because in my case, it took a while. It was a whole process. And for me, I just left. That's it. When you make that decision, umalis ka na lang. And don't ever, ever go back.
What you said was like, it's easier said than done.
Yeah, because it takes a while to process
it's a process.
Everything, diba?
Yes.
Hindi mo naman pwedeng sabihin na, hoy, iwanan mo na lang yung pamilya mo and like go to the police, diba? So it's a really long process before you reach that decision. It takes a lot of courage.
And that you have. Diba? It's so hard, like you said. There are so many factors to consider. Your marriage, the perfect picture of that, your 2 kids, everything, of course, and there's love. I mean, I'm sure even when it was tough, there was still love there, and that's hard to just walk away from, diba? But I'm glad you did. So, and speaking of finally getting to that point, what did it feel like for you? And what would you say was the best thing about making that decision?
The best thing about making that decision is I was able to live my life free from abuse, getting the power back as a woman and living my life with my family, coming back to the Philippines, starting my career again. I was so scared that no one would accept me anymore because of everything that I've gone through, and I'm coming out of a failed marriage. But I'm so happy with the Filipinos because they welcomed me with open arms and they gave me a second chance to live again. And, even now, my ex-husband and I, it's a up and down relationship. Sometimes we're good and then sometimes we're not. But I tried to have a civil relationship with him just for my daughters. But would you believe we haven't seen him since the day I left Istanbul? No, sorry. I haven't seen him since he came to the Philippines to try to win us back again. So for me, I'm just so happy that I'm able to inspire a lot of women out there to share their story, to let their voices be heard, and to know that there's hope out there, that you can still have a second chance and you don't have to live in fear anymore.
Thank you. You just inspired me, and I'm sure you inspired so many women and men. I mean, domestic violence and violence in the home or in relationships can happen to anyone. So you've inspired a lot with just you sharing your story and just being brave and speaking out, making your voice heard. I've never really seen an interview of yours before. I did a bit of research online about you talking about this, but it's so different to hear you talk about this. We've worked together in a couple of projects, and grabe yung respeto ko sa'yo tumaas lalo, because it takes a different kind of courage to speak out and really say enough and know your worth. because I think sometimes it gets to a point when you feel that, okay, maybe this is all I'm worth, diba? And you said that I am worthy of more. This is not, this is not going to be my future. And you made that decision, and you really clearly have been thriving in life. So ang galing that you did that. And I really salute you, Rufa, for being the woman that you are.
Well, Isa, thank you. I love what you said, that you should really know your worth, because we all deserve a second chance in life, and we should love ourselves more, take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. And for us, I think the best thing for us to do when we have a friend that shares their story, we should be there to listen to them and listen to their stories and encourage them to speak out and to share, because I'm sure that they're also going through a battle that we don't know about. So thank you so much, Isa, for making me remember the past.
Wait lang, na-stress ako.
But I'm so happy I'm able to inspire so many women out there to share their stories. And like what you said, it's a pandemic now, and imagine being stuck in their homes with their perpetrators. So ladies, if you're watching right now, please make that decision, say a prayer. I know it's not easy, pinagdaanan ko rin yan, but I know you're going to be able to recover and know that there's still hope there. There's a lot of us that are going to be here for you, and we can help you, and you can live a beautiful life still.
And you are a true testimony of that. So thank you so much again, Rufa, for inspiring us today and empowering us with your story, through your story. And that's it. So thank you so much. And I wish you all the best. I know you're going back to work soon. And see, I mean, just continue to be that example, shining, bright example of a strong, beautiful, smart woman who is worthy of everything in life. Everything that's good. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Isa, She Talks Asia, and Avon. And for those of you that are watching mga Pinoys all over Asia and all over the world, please watch Love Thy Woman. It's about very strong characters, and I'm sure may mapupulot kayong kwento dito. So Love Thy Woman at the Kapamilya channel, I Want TV, and all over. You can find it on YouTube and Facebook online under ABS-CBN. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Terufa. Love thy woman, not hurt thy woman.
Not hurt thy woman.
Thank you so much. And we still have a panel discussion. Lynn?
Welcome to the first ever She Talks online tribe meetup. My name is Lynn Pinugu. I'm one of the co-founders of She Talks Asia, and this afternoon is a very important and a milestone event for us, because this is not only is this our first online tribe meetup, but this is also a very important cause for us. The name of our tribe meetup for today is #SpeakOut, and we partnered with Avon Philippines to raise awareness about a very important issue. And we hope that this event will not only be informative, but that it will also be life-saving for some. Now, as you know, for many of us, as soon as the pandemic hit, we all chose to stay home, and we really associate staying home with being safe. Unfortunately, however, that is not a luxury or a privilege that everybody experiences in the same way. Because of the pandemic, it has inadvertently put a lot of women and children at risk. And these are the people who are already in abusive relationships, and because of the lockdown, they find themselves stuck at home. And today is really about us shedding a very important awareness and having very important discussion about this issue. This is a pandemic that's going on, and later we will have our esteemed guests to talk to us more about how there's this silent pandemic that's going on. And as I mentioned earlier, we partnered with Avon Philippines because we really want this to be informative and even life-saving, given the by informing you and equipping you with the proper information and tools to address if you find yourself or a loved one in a similar situation. So throughout this event, we'll be flashing the numbers of the hotline that you may call, as well as there are questions that you can ask in the comment section so that we can ask the experts about them and hopefully address all of them. And lastly, if you do find yourself in this situation, please feel free to send us a direct message. And that's something that we will forward to the proper people concerned who will be able to help. Before we start our panel discussion, I would like to welcome my fellow She Talks co-founder, Isa Calzado, as well as Cez Francisco, the CSR lead for Avon Philippines, to talk to you more about our partnership with Avon Philippines for their Isolated Not Alone campaign. Isa and Cez?
Thank you, Lynn. Good afternoon, everyone. Cez?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Isa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sorry, this is very normal now for all these online webinars and discussions. Sometimes there's a bit of lag, there's a bit of miscommunication here and there, but what matters is that we get to communicate to our audience today. Cez, I hope that you are doing well, and of course, allow me to thank you for joining us today in discussing the silent pandemic that has been affecting many women and girls with the advent of the quarantine. It's like a pandemic within the pandemic. So, Cez, let me start off. Diretsahan na tayo, di ba? I'd like to ask you about the current situation. Please tell us more about this.
Well, of course, Isa, as we all know, the government and the authorities have been forced everyone to be in lockdown or to be in quarantine in order to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. But aside from being a very huge health crisis, COVID-19 has also become a humanitarian crisis. The lockdown, which is our solution to flattening the curve, has placed many women and girls in danger. In fact, as I just want to share that the PNP has statistics that around 1,900 women are victims of domestic violence nowadays, and I think 1,700 also girls are victims during this pandemic. This is very serious and alarming, Isa. And with the restrictions in place, many are trapped in their homes with their abusers, and these abusers have taken this an advantage to commit more violence.
As you said, they are taking advantage of the pandemic to commit more violence. I mean, having said that, we do acknowledge that even before the pandemic, this is already an issue. And I think with everything, with heightened emotions, with heightened panic and fear, it is affecting everybody at this point. And I think for us now, it is very critical to understand. You talked about abusers. How do they operate, especially at a time like this? This is a unique time. How are they taking full advantage? Is the term, or advantage of the lockdown.
Actually, Isa, when we talk about domestic violence, what comes to our mind is first physical. Women, girls get hurt, or economic abuse. They were deprived of means. But during the lockdown, it had a different meaning. It could be deprivation of disinfectant, being deprived of fixing yourself, even if you're inside your house, being provided misinformation if in case you want to go out and you want to seek help from other people to prevent you from going out. While we are not allowed to travel, this is also a way of depriving the women to go out. If you want to escape, you cannot because there is a travel restriction. So those are the forms of domestic violence now during lockdown.
So yes, definitely, says you raised the point there that when we talk of abuse, it goes beyond physical abuse because people often associate it only with the physical, but actually mental and emotional and even financial
Yes.
abuse is
Has increased now.
probably in a different way scarier, 'di ba? Because you
Yeah.
cannot pinpoint exactly and verbalize, or you don't even have evidence what kind of abuse is happening. And you did mention that, perhaps another one says, I can just imagine that maybe at this point, it's easy to instill fear into the hearts of your victims, right? Diba? Parang tinatakot mo sila na
Yes.
lumabas kasi nga may pandemya, may sakit. Bukod sa takot na sila sa iyo, takot pa
Yes.
silang lumabas at humingi ng tulong.
Yes, mas nakakatakot ngayon,
Okay.
because of, nakalock ka na, and then
Yeah.
you have your abuser with you, you feel so helpless, you don't know who to reach out, kasi you feel that you're locked inside your house. The Isolated Not Alone campaign is part of Avon's promise to end domestic violence. Actually, this campaign is our response to the increasing number of incidents of domestic violence. We had reports in other markets and in the Philippines of a spike in domestic violence since February, when we started this quarantine and lockdown due to COVID-19. So in order to reach out to more women, Avon Foundation has allotted 1 million US dollars to support the frontline services or the counseling or helplines, so that women can call and can seek help. In fact, in the Philippines, four of our NGOs were recipients of almost 5 million pesos to support their programs for this cause. It's spread through our four NGOs. Luna Legal Resources, one of her panelists this afternoon, based in Davao. We also have G-Way from Dumaguete. We also have IMA Foundation from Angeles and Women's Crisis Center in Manila. So this campaign would like to raise more awareness of what is the domestic violence amidst COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Ces, and thank you, Avon, for that very generous donation to a cause that is really close to your hearts, our hearts, because we truly care, but you you have the resources. so
Invested so we
thank
can
you.
help.
So thank you. And it's great that you are helping all over the Philippines, and just like Avon, all the Avon ladies are truly all over the Philippines. So you did
Yes.
say Davao. Alam ko maraming mga Avon women dyan. And of course, this is experienced naman really nationwide and globally, unfortunately. So now the biggest problem that many women are facing is essentially, as you said earlier, being confined in their homes with their abusers who could even withhold important information from them. And right now, parang it seems, honestly, it's not just them, but more everybody in some ways is cut off from communication channels outside the world because we're all inside our homes, but more so the victims of domestic violence. And so if knock on wood, but should you find yourself in a situation like this, sis, what can you do?
Isa, actually, this is a very, very difficult situation. I cannot really imagine being in the shoe of a woman who is inside the house, locked down, and you don't have any means. But I would like to encourage that person through this awareness media forum that they have, to speak out, to reach out. We have four NGOs that they can call. They can also reach out to their local government units to seek help. And through this media forum, I'd like to encourage everyone that they may know a family member or a friend or a relative who may be suffering domestic violence, to speak out for them. That's the only way. We have to, if those victims cannot speak out, let's speak out for them. Isa.
That's very important, says at this point in our lives, it is truly important for all of us to speak out whatever abuse is happening to us. And sometimes, as you said, di ba, hindi kaya ng mga binibiktima na mag-speak up or mag-speak out. Kung hindi nyo man kayang siguro humingi ng tulong sa isang NGO, like you said earlier, no, have the family member or friend speak out for you. So
Yes.
it's still the first course of action is for you to speak out to somebody about it.
Yes,
Yes.
Isa.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, if I know someone who is just on that subject, not just on that note, if I do know someone who is going through the situation right now, what is the right way for me to help without making the problem worse? Kasi, so now we discussed as a victim, as someone who is experiencing this. I don't want to keep, I don't want to keep saying victim, but you know, as someone who is experiencing abuse, and you have spoken out, you have told a friend, a family member, what is the best course of action for that friend or family member so that they can report this, take action, but not make the matters worse for the one experiencing the abuse?
Yeah, thanks, Isa. First, I would like to suggest that that person, if she has that courage and strength, first, they have to report. Call the authorities. Tell them their situation so they can be helped. As mentioned earlier, if the authorities are not will not be available at a particular time, we have the 4 NGOs and other NGOs whom they can call. The helplines are available for them. These are flashed in our screens right now. Or for those with friends whom they believe are victims, we can speak out to them. They can share informations like about this forum by tagging the Isolated Not Alone campaign to spread that Avon is doing this or the other NGOs are doing this to support a friend or a family member who may be in need of counseling or help.
Thank you so much, Ces. I think it's a very important message for us to share with everyone right now that though we are isolated, we are not alone. So definitely we may be isolated, but we are never alone, and we must speak out.
Yes,
so thank you so much, Ces, for that enlightening conversation, and I really hope that, after our discussion, we have a panel discussion now with experts, and I hope that everybody watching this right now, from your screens, wherever you are right now, please listen, learn, and at some point, we have to take action. So we have to care enough to take action. So thank you so much for this, Ces, and I wish you the best. Have a good afternoon. Lynn?
Thank you so much, Isa and Ces, for that very insightful discussion. Ces and Isa will be staying on with us as we continue with the panel discussion. But I think one thing that struck me from that conversation now is that for a lot of people, they often feel that, or they just because they don't see that it's happening, they feel that it couldn't happen to them. But if you look at the statistics, the preliminary findings of the National Demographic and Health Survey in 2017 found that 1 out of 4 women have experienced spousal violence. And for us, for me, that's such an overwhelming number, because the likelihood that I know someone who have gone through this experience is very high. And as Isa and Ces mentioned earlier, today's discussion is really about equipping ourselves, not just because we may be victims or we may be experiencing abuse and we need to be aware of it, but also because we may know someone, either a friend or a loved one who's going through it. And it's important for us to be educated so we know how to be able to help and speak out for them. So to further help us learn more about this issue and to give us more concrete steps on how to be able to address the situation, we have amazing guests for you this afternoon. As I mentioned earlier, we really want this to be an enlightening conversation. So if you do have questions for them, please feel free to type them, and we'll do our best to address each one. So let's begin. So I want to introduce our first guest. She is an amazing woman. In 2005, she was nominated for the Nobel Prize for her efforts on peace, diplomacy, and dialogue. And she's a current senator here in the Philippines, and she is an advocate of human and civil liberties of women. Let us welcome Senator Risa Hontiveros. Joining us as well is an independent journalist and a Pulitzer Fellow whose work includes a focus on gender issues, Ana Santos. And last but not least, we also have the chair of the board of the trustees of the Luna Legal Resource for Women and Children, which is one of the 4 foundations that Avon is actually supporting in their fight against violence. Let us welcome Attorney Meong Cabarde, or Attorney Meong. Hi everyone, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Good afternoon, Lynn. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Everyone, thank you for having us.
You know, so hang on, I'm a bit starstruck. Just because I have such amazing people to talk about this issue. So as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of misconception that happens when we talk about domestic violence. In fact, even the name itself, domestic violence, one would think that it can only happen to you within the context of marriage, or it can only happen within a hetero relationship, or that it could only happen, or it's only happening once you've been hit. So I guess I want to start this discussion by first defining what do we really mean by domestic violence, just so everyone at home could be in the same page when we talk about, or when we have this discussion. Anna, you wanna answer that?
Sure. So exactly what you said. Now, when we say domestic violence, it kind of sounds like this is just something that happens between 2 people who share a home, by virtue of domestic. But the broader term for it would really be intimate partner violence, because this is violence that's characterized by, this can be someone that you had a dating relationship with, so an ex-lover, an ex-paramour, or what have you. Right now, it's an ex, sometimes Tinder date, right? Someone who you are still in a relationship with, or someone that you were formerly in a relationship with and may or may not have had a child with. Ang tawag nila is a dating or sexual relationship. So that's the kind of context or dynamic that we're looking at. And that's very important to frame it around that way, because that's also why it's so difficult to talk about, number one, to talk about this kind of violence happening to you. This is a person that you, at some point, because you have an intimate relationship with this person, this is a person you trusted, maybe even continue to trust. This is a person you are in love with. And when we talk about love, this is a person that you already hinge, your dreams, your aspirations for whatever your future might be on this person. There's so much at stake in terms of emotional investment. That's one thing that makes it so hard to even admit it to yourself that this is happening. And before that, to go into the definition, let's also talk about the different kinds. It's not just what domestic violence or intimate partner violence. It doesn't just happen when you are physically struck or hit by this person that you're in a relationship with. There's different forms also. There's psychological violence. So the kind of emotional stress and abuse when you're being criticized in front of someone, when you're being demeaned. And there's also economic abuse. So this is withholding either, if you share a home or you have some kind of financial arrangement about sharing expenses, the withholding that financial support from you is a form of threat. Okay? So when you look at it, all of this just tells you that abuse and this kind of violence is about control, It's about diminishing your self-esteem and your self-worth and making you dependent on this person that you have an intimate relationship with and someone that you trust and love. So it's so complicated, very complex.
Right. I think that one challenge about addressing this issue is that while we do have the numbers, as I mentioned earlier, 1 out of 4 has experienced spousal violence based on that statistic, but it might not necessarily be accurate, right? Because although those are the numbers that have been reported, but for all we know, that's very much an underrepresentation of what's actually happening. Senator Hontiveros, I wanted to ask you, given that, and I know that this is something that your office has been very vocal about ever since, the lockdown started. You have initiatives regarding this. What do you think has been the major effect of the pandemic when it comes to this issue?
Well, I guess, Miss Lynn, the immediate effect has been, in addition to the pressure of domestic violence and all other forms of violence against women, all other forms as well of violations of the rights of children. On top of that is a double or multiple overlay of the pressures brought on by having to try to survive a pandemic, a health crisis, and then also having to survive the effects, economic and other effects, of quarantines or lockdowns. And the way that these two additional pressures make it even more difficult, first of all, to survive that kind of violence or those kinds of violations, and then to seek redress of the grievance. As you were describing at the very start of our forum, the irony that when we are told to quarantine or lockdown, we are presuming that we will be safe in this space. But it is not the case for too large a number of our sisters and our children. And the numbers may even be underreported, also because of the pressures brought to bear by the pandemic and the quarantines.
Well, listening to this, it sounds very not just overwhelming, but it sounds like a part of you would feel hopeless, right? Like, what can you do in this kind of position? As someone who is in a position of power, what is the role of lawmakers in terms of protecting the people or your constituents when it comes to this issue?
Well, one of the things I was preparing to share about during the forum is what domestic violence victim survivors can expect once they successfully contact the authorities. And again, I do use that adverb successfully purposefully because, diba, kung naka-quarantine tayo, if we are quarantined under pandemic conditions, first of all, there's the fact that we're locked down in our houses. There may be no public transport to take if we can get out of the house. If there's a chance that the abuser is out on some errand that only he or she can do because he or she may be the only holder of the quarantine pass in an earlier period, or once the survivor gets to the barangay or a PNP station, there may not be enough personnel there to attend to their complaint. And not all the personnel may also be already gender sensitive and have been trained to process these kinds of complaints. But if the best circumstances for obtaining what victims, survivors, complainants should be able to expect would include at the minimum that the authorities should create a written report of the abuse reported by the survivor. Secondly, that the survivor can also be interviewed by the police or by the Katarungang Pambarangay in order to get more details about the abusive incident or incidents. And then, survivor of abuse that is even more or most severe in nature, a full investigation may or should also be done. And I'm sure attorney knows this better than me. But these are the minimum. These are the floor that women or even some men and children who take that extra courage to speak out about the abuse and seek redress of grievance should be able to expect from our authorities.
Thank you for that, Santa Teresa. I think that's really why we wanted this forum to happen, is because we want people to know the concrete steps that they should be able to expect from the authorities. Before I go to Attorney Meong, Anna, you wanted to add something to what Senator Risa said?
Yes, I'm really glad that Senator Riza put it out there, line by line, what you can expect and what you are entitled to as your right as a citizen. We had several reports came to me during the start of the lockdown, especially when we were at the strictest point, right, where only the head of the family can have a quarantine pass. We would get reports of women trying to make reports to the barangay captain. That's your first. If you can't go to the station, your first line of defense should be your barangay captain. And the barangay captain would say, tsaka mo na i-report pag tapos na yung lockdown. How, already at that first line, you're being turned away. So the women wouldn't know, this is something new. What can I do? How can I assert myself? So now it's very clear, right, that from our legislators themselves, and I'm sure Atty. Meong will also say this, hindi na, that the pandemic doesn't stop beatings. If only it did. Right? So you cannot also stop our authorities from accepting complaints and acting on them.
Thank you, Anna and Santa Teresa. Attorney Meong, before I ask a question, first of all, let me just say how happy I am that we have a male panelist as part of the discussion. I do feel that, whenever I attend conversations about this, it's often just women who are part of it. So I'm so happy that we have an ally here. And again, as we mentioned earlier, obviously this is not just an issue that just affects women. This does not discriminate between gender and age, right? So this is something for everybody. Attorney Meong, as someone who really works in the grassroots, I guess what I want to ask is, how do you, what are the things that are actually hindering them from bringing this report to the authorities, right? Because as Senator Risa already outlined earlier, what we should do, but obviously the reality might be a lot more difficult than that. What are the things that are actually stopping them from actually reporting?
Thank you, Lynn. It's very interesting that in the past 15 years that Luna Legal Resource Center for Women and Children has been operating in Davao City, we were able to document a few reasons why it's difficult for some women to leave violent relationships. One thing, many of them are still romanticizing their love affair, no? Because we have brought up and trained our women to live like the life of Cinderella, the Cinderella effect we are calling. They're waiting for their Prince Charming one day to rescue this damsel in distress. So sabi nga ng isang kliyente namin, siya lang yung lumingon sa amin at sa akin, attorney, nung college, ihiwalayan ko pa ba or iiwanan ko pa ba? So many of them are so in love with the idea that they are in love and they are in a relationship. The other reason we saw why it's very challenging for them to leave the relationship is they always think of the welfare of their children. Many of them would ask, how will their children grow? No, what will be the effects on their children if they grow up without a father? And we always ask them, would it be healthier for your children to grow up seeing their parents always quarreling and always, to the point of almost killing each other? I don't think that's a healthy situation. But the most used reason or common reason for women having difficulty living a violent relationship, because the center addresses the concerns of indigent women, it's because of their economic dependence on men. As I have said, the culture of patriarchy in the Philippines has made our women so dependent on men that they can't stand on their own if they leave their violent relationship. So how will they feed their children? How will they survive? So they stick it out, even if it's very abusive and violent, because they need to survive economically. And many of them, another reason also is that they end up blaming themselves. So they lose their self-esteem because of the psychological impact that the violence has been, the psychological impact that the violent act has brought to them. So they would always they would always blame themselves as the reason why they were beaten up or they were violated. And lastly, we also saw that one of the reasons why it's difficult for women to leave a violent relationship is that they do not really have a very supportive community outside their relationship. Now, when they go back to their parents, malimit sinasabihan sila, pinasok mo yan. Hindi yan na parang kanin na pag sinubo mo na paso, you spit it out. Or pag pupunta sila sa pare, sa kanilang mga priest ng mga friends, the priest would say what God has put together, let no one put asunder. Or pupunta sila sa police, they will be blamed as well. So, or sa friends, no, sasabihin ng mga friends, tiis-tiis lang friend, no, makakaraos ka rin sa ganyang sitwasyon. So, you don't really have a very supportive community outside your relationship. That's why many of them stay in that abusive relationship. Because, like Anna, I agree that domestic violence is far bigger than the space where it happens. It's an issue of gender-based violence which centralizes on the issue of power. And this is always the interplay between the powerful and the powerless, the more powerful and the less powerful. And unfortunately, in the Philippines, which sports a very patriarchal society, women and children are more vulnerable to all these forms of violence. And these abuse and violence does not only happen in the privacy of your homes, it can happen anywhere, in the market, in the mall, in public places. That's why we need to keep our women and children safe wherever, whenever.
Right. Attorney Meong, thank you for dissecting for us the challenges further, no? Because I think for a lot of people, some would be so easy to dismiss. Why don't you just report, right? You're already being hit, umalis ka na dyan sa relationship na yun, huwag ka magpaka tanga, di ba? Parang it feels like it's so easy. This forum is basically about that, which is just for us to understand how complex the issue is. And this is a question for everybody. Given all these challenges surrounding the issue, what actually are the very concrete ways we can do to speak out for these women who seem to be powerless in terms of addressing their situation? Or how can we help make the community more supportive for them?
If I may start, just to answer that question, I believe that at the moment, the battlefield is our psychological thought constructs, our mindset, our framing, the way we look at the relationship between men and women. So as a starter, we need to educate our women and make them believe that no woman deserves to be treated violently or in a very abusive way. One woman is too much. So we have to make them believe that as a woman and as a person, they are entitled to all the human rights there is in the world, and no one, not even the person they love, has the right to hurt them, to violate them, or to abuse them. And if they can muster that belief that they are entitled to these rights, then it would be, I think, easier for them to break the cycle of violence, and that's when they start going to authorities, reporting, and even to NGOs who fully understand what they're going through so that they can speak up. So we need to end the silence of this epidemic that is called gender-based violence.
Thank you, Attorney Meong.
I agree exactly with what Attorney Meong said, and that it has to start with a mindset. But I'm going to expand that a little bit more and engage everyone in when I say change your mindset. I have this unpopular opinion that, as parents, we have an obligation to raise our children in such a way that our girls will know that they do not deserve to be hit, and our boys will know that there is no place for you to hit a woman, a person. Okay, so it has to come together in that way. Sometimes it's the parents, and sometimes subconsciously, who may not realize that we're passing on these accepted power dynamics to children. In the context of just really widely accepted gender stereotypes. When we say boys will be boys and that they hit, that's a gender stereotype that we're reinforcing that we should not. Boys also need to be taught that there's no place for violence in the context of what we call love. women the same. And I think that's also another step, reframing what we know and accept to be love. You know, it's not just all about, girl, tiis lang. May hangganan, you know? There are deal breakers. There are points where we break. And we have to know what that is. We're not throwing in the towel just because, you know, we think that this is a minor thing. And then that's my last point. To everyone who's listening out there, you know, Lynn, you said earlier 1 in 4 women have been abused. Okay, I'll take this one. I'm that 1 of 4 women in this panel. All right? So, and I would like to engage or you know, invite everyone who is listening. Please understand, when this happens to a woman, by the time that she gets around to reporting it to someone or even telling a friend, this has been happening long before that. It doesn't often start out with him hitting you right away. It starts out with him blaming you for something that wasn't your fault, him criticizing your appearance, or just diminishing your character and sense of worth before it even gets to that point where you are hit. So please try to understand that happens, you know, where it's coming from, why it's so hard to come out there and talk to people. That's why what Atty. Meong was saying, it's so important that you have a supportive ecosystem or support group who will not just, you know, take you in if you need to run away, but also understand you and not judge you. Or yung karaniwan nga sinasabi na, you know, you can still work this out, etc. Those are the things that you do not want to hear. Sometimes you just need someone to listen and understand where it's coming from. Thank you. That's my 3 points.
I embrace you, Ana. And thank you again. Virtual embrace. Kung pwede lang tayong lahat mag-group hug kay Ana. And thank you so much again for speaking from out of the pain of your life and yet your courage and survivorship to keep on talking with us. And for our sisters who haven't found their voice or been able to raise it yet. And I say an emphatic yes also to what Anna said about, and I would phrase it as, I do believe that every good thing, every bad thing also, but every good thing begins in the family and the home. So yes, it's so important for us to overturn that sexism and misogyny and patriarchy that Atty. Meong was talking about. To look at how we raise and socialize our daughters and our sons. Not to say that there's some kind of biological determinism that only girls can grow up this way and only boys can grow up that way. Pero kasi sa socialization ng kasalukuyang mga kultura natin, we tend to cultivate only those certain aspects among our girl children, those other certain aspects among our boy children. Kailangan basagin natin yung false at saka yung destructive na dichotomy niyan. So now beyond the family and the home, to return again to the question or the point raised by Atty. Meong, how do we, as we're transforming the homes and the families through our immediate relationships, how to also capacitate the communities to support us women in raising our voices and also us raising our voices for our children. Yung barangay, as Anna was talking about earlier, and also it should be the PNP, should be among the first line of defense, not withdrawal of defense, not offense for women survivors speaking up about domestic violence and even about online sexual exploitation of children. So communities could support survivors through the provision of services, homes, like if women need to run away, yes, those shelters or centers na mas nahirapan ding nag-operate ngayon under conditions of pandemic and quarantine, raising awareness about the issue, rallying support for causes that support the survivors. So communities and our very homes are really the first tools or weapons, tools, instruments for changing this whole culture that enables and then afterwards tends to turn a blind eye to violence against women and children.
Right. First of all, let me echo what Senator Risa said about wanting to give Anna a very big bear hug. You know, she and I go way back. She was my first boss when I got back to the Philippines. And I've always known her as this feisty, strong woman, and for her to share that this is actually something that happened to her, for me that just makes it more concrete that this is something that can happen to anybody, right? This doesn't there's no stereotype for someone who experiences this kind of violence. I really love also how we kept talking about the formation actually starts at home. I run a non-profit school where I deal with a lot of low-income communities, and I really hear it from the parents how they socialize men to be as boys to be a certain way and girls to just take it all in. Like if a boy pulls your hair, he likes you. Which then translate into the future. If he's mean to me, he must love me more, right? So it's up to us to break it. But another point I think that Senator Risa raised, which I think is very important, when this happened, when the pandemic happened, obviously all the donations went to the frontliners because it's an urgent need. But we kind of forgot that this is actually when the centers for women need it the most. And I guess that's why for She Talks, that's why we were very proud to have partnered with Avon because of their campaign to really make sure that they build the capacity of these centers to accommodate the increase or to continue building their resources, because they're the ones who are working in the grassroots and who are really catering to these kinds of reports and requests. We have a question from our audience, and I think this is an important one. We mentioned earlier, Senator Risa mentioned earlier, outlined that how we should be able to report these to the authorities, like these kinds of things to the authorities, and what are the different steps. But actually, what if it's actually those in power who are the ones who are abusive? I mean, I'm sure you've seen recent articles about the different rape committed by our law enforcers recently, that there was an increase during pandemic. And also another question from the audience: how do we hold elected officials accountable when they make insensitive remarks about domestic violence, which of course minimizes the issue? Anyone can answer. I'm not just looking at our senator, but anyone who has an insight that this could answer. How do we hold those power and accountable?
Well, from my training, which is legal in nature, we can always make use of the available laws we have in the country to run after those who violate them. So we can file, depending on what the circumstances would be, the necessary criminal, civil, or administrative cases against erring government officials. So if it's the PNP, we have a set of laws covering the decorum and ethics that our law enforcers must observe. And other government officials, you have civil service regulations requiring them to behave in a particular way. So if they violate all this, the recourse of these women who have been violated is to run after them by filing the necessary complaints, document everything that has happened so that no loopholes may be found in their complaint, and then approach the appropriate bodies or institutions where they can lodge their complaints. So that's what you do legally. Identify what the violation is all about, the nature of the case, find the appropriate law that can address the concern, and ask the services of your paralegals or your lawyer friends or any individuals or institutions that provide free services if you can't afford the services, so that they can help you bring your concern or cause of action to the appropriate institutions or agencies in government that will hear, try, and decide your case.
Right. Thank you, Attorney Meong. Anything to add, Anne or Senator Risa?
Well, since Attorney Meong mentioned the laws, of course, top of mind for us would be the Violence Against Women and Their Children law. And then in a way, a companion measure to that, since we're always progressively trying to work on a policy framework that is women and children friendly and empowering, more recently we have the Safe Spaces Act, and which can also further be amended to strengthen the mechanisms within it for VAUC prevention and response. Ngayon na panahon ng pandemic at quarantine, everyone's encouraged to stay indoors. But as we've been discussing, there can actually be higher cases of even online sexual harassment and violence, bukod sa nakakapanlulumong reports of sexual harassment at checkpoints or in other public spaces, even at the hands of those who should be our law enforcers, online then. So, and these abuses are covered in the provisions of the Safe Spaces Act. And I think it's very important what Attorney Meong pointed out to us, that under these laws, everyone is obliged, obligated to obey. No one is above the law, especially those who are supposed to enforce them. Naalala ko nung finally na ipasa yung Safe Spaces Act, nagtanong yung ibang mga sisters na, paano yung isang mataas na opisyal na bastos manalita tungkol sa babae, ganyan-ganyan. Well, we had to remind ourselves that there is immunity from suit, at least for the highest official as of the moment. Pero hindi pa rin ako nabawasan ng pag-asa sa pagpasa ng Safe Spaces Act, because I think it will also be part of changing our culture, that we will be more empowered to call out our public officials from LGU to national level na, hey, we've been passing these laws. Ibig sabihin, ina-affirm natin masama, krimen ang pagdahas sa babae in whatever setting, krimen ang pag-violate sa karapatan ng bata, and part of preventing and punishing those violations is to change, yung sinasabi ni Attorney Meong at ni Ana kanina, to really change our mindset, to change our worldview, our culture. So if we can push back as citizens, even vis-a-vis our elected officials, then we are moving closer to the day that truly no one is above the law when it comes to respecting or violating women's and children's rights.
Thank you, Senator Risa.
And also that the CHR, the Commission on Human Rights, they have a gender office that set up an online portal where you can report incidents of violence or harassment online and anonymously. So that's very important now, because a lot of us can't go out. And of course, the anonymity, especially like Lynn, you were saying, sometimes it's really a person of power, your boss or a public official maybe, or a law enforcer who was the perpetrator. So that's one aspect. Also, there's a group called Bantay Bastos on Facebook, right? And this is where, all right, you may have gotten harassed online. You may have gotten all sorts of lewd comments online or on your phone, for example. You can send them to Bantay Bastos, and then they put it out on their Facebook page to, number one, report that kind of harassment and to have that person blocked or reported to Facebook, but also to warn other people, right? In terms of what kind of harassment is happening to you and how you can put an immediate stop to it. I'd recommend putting it on a platform like Bantay Bastos, because then at least it's in that forum where, it's not me, Ana Santos, and somebody will come after me for to be vindictive or calling me out for reporting a case of violence or harassment.
And I guess what I love about those kinds of platforms is that whenever you see someone speak up, it also emboldens you, right? Yeah. To voice out the exact thing that you're going through. And that's really also our hope for this afternoon. I got the question from the audience, which I think is very interesting and happens very often, not just here, but anywhere. Sometimes when a woman is viewed as sexy, or like because she dresses in a certain manner, people tend to say that she deserved to be raped, or she deserves to be hit by her husband because she's alluring other men. While others, if you're more demure, then it's more natural for people to feel bad for that person, right? Like, what are your thoughts on this bias that exists, and how do we change that? And do you experience that as well in your work? Sorry, Senator Risa, you were saying.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Lynn. There's this beautiful mural on a wall just outside University of St. La Salle in Bacolod. And the artist, also a woman, she painted the wall red, and against that backdrop, she painted different women and girls walking, wearing all different kinds of clothes. Like we dress up in the morning, we dress up for how we feel, we dress up for the weather outside, we dress up for whatever we're going to do. We dress up, first of all, for ourselves. And then at the bottom of this mural of women and girls walking, wearing our different clothes, she painted the words, "No dress code for rape." So, the question, I read it also, and I really feel so strongly for it and for the sister who asked about it. Because that kind of bias, and I agree with her, it's really a bias in our society. Yung bias na yan, bahagi yan ng victim blaming. Na kung pa-sexy kang nagbihis, kasi gusto mo, karapatan natin, then you deserved whatever abuse you may have suffered. Kung mas demure ka nagbihis, then parang yung premise is you deserve more the protection. Well, excuse me, hindi yung mga biktima at survivor ng iba't ibang klase ng sexual violence ang dapat sisihin. It is the people who perpetrate such crimes. And even if you want to look at that bias, my gosh, sa iba't ibang pananamit natin, sa iba't ibang sirkumstansya na naghagahasa tayong mga babae. Some men too, but the majority really of victims of sexual crimes have been female rather than male. So we really need to turn the bias around and, let those who hold it confront it. We ourselves confront it. I mean, for example, even prostituted women. All women do not deserve to be violated. There's a lot of debates now, sa women's movements, a feminist movement, about prostitution, about sex work. But no woman, no matter what our work is, no matter how we dress, no matter kung sino pa tayo, deserve to be treated less than human. Kasi sabi nga natin, women's rights are human rights.
Lynn, it brings me back to the concept of power. I think we need to send a strong message across that it's not the way people dress that's why they get raped. Because based on our experience, we have children who are wrapped in clothes who are even raped. We have clients in the center na mga kasamahan natin or mga kapatid nating Muslim, they're wrapped in malong na nare-rape. So it's really about how one person looks at the other as if this person can control and manipulate the other person. And generally, while we're not saying everyone, but because men have been emboldened by the culture of patriarchy that they become so sexist and misogynist, they see women as sex objects or objects of pleasure. And exactly what you said earlier, boys were brought up to believe in boys will be boys. So for as long as we do not check that kind of thinking and that kind of construct in society, people will always continue to justify na kaya siya na-rape dahil sexy siya manamit or kaya siya na-rape dahil medyo may kalandian siya. Now, gone are the days that we believe in the Maria Clara doctrine. Rape is always about power. And unfortunately, men was privileged by society to embrace all this power. And I think the call for cultural revolution is high and timely to look at it closely and turn the tables around and look at it from a lens of seeing everyone as equal. This is not a battle between men and women. This is the struggle of everyone, the entire humanity, against the culture of patriarchy. So it's our struggle as men and women against patriarchy to rectify the mistakes of history.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add something on, to go back to another kind of violence. You're talking about sexual violence, and this question really resonated a lot with me. How come you don't believe sometimes when someone is reporting an infraction on sexual violence or physical violence because of what you perceive that person to be? And Lynn, you were exactly saying, but Anna, I'll draw on my own experience. This is the only second time that I have ever shared this publicly. And Lynn, you were saying yourself, I know Anna to be so feisty and headstrong. That's why it was very difficult for people to even believe me. That I could let this happen to me. And there were implications that if you allowed this to happen to you, katapang-tapang mo, tanga ka. Right? So that I totally understand that's kind of what you come across, or the kind of barrier that you come across because of our own personalities and characters. But again, violence, whether physical or sexual, is about power and control. It doesn't pick a certain person, a certain age, or certain demographic. The insight that I've gotten reporting on this issue the last couple of years is that mostly the community women, the grassroots women, have an easier time to report. And when I say easier, please don't misconstrue that. It's in relation to what they have to lose, right? Because when women who are in a position of fame, of position of governance, for example, or some kind of position of influence, they have so much more to lose in terms of social standing, and the shame of it, no, across a wider audience versus an ordinary person. And also, I wouldn't know where to go. Sometimes you don't know where to go. I go to Aling Police, I call the Aling Police hotline, but do I want to go to a women's shelter? I'm not sure, right? Or who else can I trust? So those are certain difficulties. And I guess the last message would just really be, know that any kind of violence doesn't pick a certain person or certain type. It can happen to anyone. It's all about power and control.
One of my biggest aha moments from listening to all of you speak is that really we need to check whether in some way we've been complicit to creating this kind of environment wherein it's difficult for women to report what they're going through, right? And I guess just to bring back the discussion in relation to we talked about how we need to change mindsets, we need to educate better, it needs to start at home, it needs to be reinforced in schools. But what is our message to, or what is your advice to actually like women who are experiencing this now, or someone who is witnessing or who thinks, who suspects that his or her loved one is undergoing domestic abuse? Like for example, I saw that there is now a global hand signal for domestic violence, right? Like meaning that if you're in a Zoom call with someone and your friend, for example, you're talking about what you're doing for the day, and then your friend suddenly signs, it's a call for help, right? This signal is it means abuse is happening. For me, that was such a brilliant way of trying to address this more concretely, because that also takes out the trace, or that means that the abuser won't suspect you trying to report. But what other advice can you give for people who really feel that they want to help someone who is in this kind of position?
Well, Miss Lynn, since you've organized this forum and you asked that question, then I agree that it's really, really timely that we also come up with our more creative and coordinated way to enable women, including our sisters who may be participating in this forum,
Right.
to ask for help and to know that we will help each other. Kasi halimbawa sa United States, meron silang Angela Code. This was pre-pandemic. They're out on a blind date, as a restaurant, and for whatever reason, they start to feel unsafe or endangered. Then they can just tell one of the waiters, could you call Angela for me? Pero code siya na, tawagan mo ako ng taxi because I want to get out of here.
Right.
In America naman, they have this cry, and as usual, Latin America, more revolutionary. Even on the street, when they're experiencing or they're witnessing any sexual harassment, they can call out la ley, the law, just because several of those countries have passed anti-sexual harassment and sexual violence laws. And they too are struggling a bit against very macho cultures in their own societies. Or recently, panahon na ng pandemic, we read reports of French women going to botica, drugstores, and then saying some code word, I forget what it is now, but that is a signal to the pharmacist that I'm experiencing domestic violence at home and I need help. I want to be put in touch with the authorities. And of course, sa EU, sa Canada, they put up big funds to construct either shelters for those women or to subsidize their stay in hotels or in for the duration. So I'm just getting the feeling more and more as we all converse na, baka this is a moment for us in the Philippines to, ngayon lalo na panahon ng pandemic at quarantine, to come up with, I don't know, some kind of mechanism na pwedeng magbuklod-buklod sa ating lahat, and the existing infrastructures like the 4 NGOs that you're already working with in Davao, you mentioned Dumaguete, Pampanga, and here in Metro Manila, and many others, I believe, to put out a really concrete support network for women wanting to take back their bodily integrity in this time of pandemic and quarantine.
We'd be happy to participate in that longer discussion even after this forum. I do think also that we need to localize some of those best practices that they see. Of course, apart from the hotlines that were flashing on screen, like as numbers that women who are experiencing abuse could call. Other concrete initiatives or like concrete ways you can help out a loved one during this time, Anna or Attorney Meong?
If I may share, of course, first, people should start thinking and believing that domestic violence is not a private matter. It's a public crime. Therefore, even if you're just a neighbor, you have all the right and obligation to interfere to end violence. Also, I remember one organization in Cebu before, not sure if it's still existing, they organized the community called Bantay Banay.
Yes, Lihok Pilipina, Attorney.
Yes, Senator. Sa Lihok, Filipina, they organized the community through Bantay Banay, where every household, meron silang parang kampanilya, bell. And whenever they sense that in their neighbor may nangyayaring domestic violence, they sound the bell until everybody in that village pinapaingay nila yung bell for two things. Sending the message doon sa bahay kung saan nangyayari yung violence. Now, we know what you're doing, you have to end that. And also sending the message sa kanilang mga authorities that there is violence going on. We need you to come and help and rescue kung sino yung inaabuso. So that's one concrete project which I think worked in Cebu. And of course, third, pwedeng, as you already mentioned, Lee, you can call for help. And I hope all the helplines are made available in public. In Davao City, we have specific arrangement with our 911 that they can use and dial 911 for distress calls in cases of domestic violence. So hindi lang siya for other emergencies, but we can also call 911 so that the authorities from 911 can come and rescue women in abusive relationship. They can go to their house and rescue them.
Ang ganda nung sinabi mo na sounding the bell.
Yeah.
Just a few weeks ago, the UNFPA came out with an ad, an AVP, and it was exactly that kind of scenario where a couple was arguing in a condo unit, and then the neighbors started sounding their pots and pans, their windows, just to stop the violence and to also show that, hey, the neighbors are watching and they're not going to allow this to happen. Now, I thought that was also very important because my friend of mine had told me that in their condo, di ba uso ngayon yung mga Viber groups na sa condos nyo, right? Ganyan nag-uusap. So a couple in the condo was arguing very loudly. And my friend, who is familiar with signs of violence, knew that this was something that could quickly escalate. So she texted the Viber group. She said, do you hear that couple arguing? What's going on? And some people answered, wala na tayong pakialam dyan. Let's not interfere. Buti na lang, Atty. Meong and Senator Risa, some other people were saying, wait, that's we can do something about this. What can we do? We cannot just let someone who we know that may be in danger can't just leave them alone. So they went to security, and security said, well, somebody has to complain. Whether it's that person or you. So buti na lang din, the security personnel were aware that a complaint has to be raised. So my friend said, okay, I'm complaining. I feel like this is a point of an incident that may escalate. And if you want me to report that I'm just disturbed by the noise, okay, fine. But please do something about it.
Correct.
And that was the trigger for security to, break it up, and also to send that signal that, this is, people are watching, and that can kind of already act as a protective shell, for women or who may find themselves in this kind of very delicate situation.
I guess it's really about being a good neighbor and being vigilant, no? Parang I think at the end of the day, that sense of responsibility and actually applying it into checking in, reporting, and being sensitive to the signs or to the red flags. We have gone a little bit over time. We do have some questions. Maybe I'll ask them all, and then we can do a quick fire of replying. I do think that they're very important things to address. Okay, very similar to what we talked about. How can we help a child be abused, who's being abused by their own parents? How can we continue, apart from conversation at home, what schools can role play in making sure that we diminish these kinds of gender biases, especially those reinforcing domestic and gender violence? And I think this is more for Senator Risa. What are two major differences of the Safe Space Act versus the old existing law? Okay. All right. Baka we can start with the last one, and then we'll tackle the rest.
Oh, sige. So, in the same way that Anna was explaining that domestic violence is more than what it would seem just by simple definition, yung Safe Spaces Act din, pinalawak yung pagkaintindi natin sa sexual harassment. That it may be done not only by a superior to a subordinate, but also by a subordinate to a superior, precisely because of that power relation between women and men, no matter what the formal status is, for example, in a company or in a school. Tapos yung pagkaintindi sa Safe Spaces Act, that sexual harassment can also happen between peers and also between strangers. Kaya nga in public spaces. So hindi lang sa workplaces, hindi lang sa schools, pati sa mga kalsada, mall, public transport, at lahat ng public spaces. And yung isa pang malaking pagkakaiba ng Safe Spaces Act sa lumang anti-sexual harassment law, which I really appreciate, na-redefine ng Safe Spaces Act na the person herself or himself, yung katawan natin, yung personal space natin, should itself be a safe space as both a private and a public space na dapat maintindihan, marespeto, maprotektahan mutually ng lahat ng mga kababayan, yung safe space na iyon ng ating pagkatao. And then yung I think very important also the second question na, a good place to start also in terms of socializing our kids, rearing them well, even in schools, in these matters, is our old beloved responsible parenthood and reproductive health law. Nandiyan na kasi yung provisions hanggang ngayon. Ayan, nangingiti din si Ana. Nandiyan na yung mga provisions about age-appropriate, development-appropriate, sexual and reproductive health and rights education for our children. Kasi dahil hindi pa rin natin napatupad yan, ayan, it has led to these various violations of women's sexual and reproductive rights and the withholding of our sexual and reproductive health, which that withholding, which is in itself a form of violence. Sorry, I forgot the first question, Ms. Lynn. But,
it can actually be answered by anybody. How can we help a child that's being abused by their own parents?
Ayun, quick addition lang, sorry, kasi yung online sexual exploitation of children, it's so sad, tayo na daw ay isang global hub para dyan. The incidence in the Philippines has tripled in the last 3 years, ayon sa isang report ng International Justice Mission. So, and any and all ways we can work with IJM, with UNICEF, with various members of the Child Rights Network and the whole network to really crack down on the buying of this, the pull in cooperation with international law enforcement agencies to put a stop to this practice among generators and sellers of these OSEC materials. We need to also have the social media platforms and apps be accountable, because the contacts are happening on Facebook and Twitter. The transactions are happening also on WhatsApp and Telegram. And then last but not the least, yung daluyan ng pera, kailangan gawing accountable din. The money transferring platforms, the banks, etc.
We have a lot of work to do, Senator Risa.
Good time to be alive. Daming kailangan gawin.
So a quick follow-up question. I know the answer, but just to hear it from you, does our existing laws also protect the LGBTQIA+, especially trans women?
It does, and as it should. Because trans women are women, trans persons are part of the LGBTQI+ community. And as I said earlier, women's rights are human rights, LGBTQIA rights are human rights, at lahat ng rights na yan nag-overlap. Kasi as Attorney Meong said earlier and beautifully, this is really a struggle of all humanity. So ano pang idadagdag natin doon, di ba?
Thank you, Senator Risa. I just want to ask, as a last question for everyone in the panel, how can we use our voices to speak out for others?
Natakot ako, parang pang final sa Miss Universe. Let me think.
I'm going to can I quote Michelle Obama here, because she has this she has this memoir that is like beautiful, and I was watching the documentary, the behind the scenes making of it the few weeks ago, and she said that your story is your power. So if you have a story to share, that is already one way of using your influence and creating awareness within your network. I shared that this is only the second time for me to talk about my personal experience. And I have to tell you, that happened to me almost 20 years ago. You can imagine how I didn't even realize that now it's easy for me to talk about it. Risa and Ms. Lian and Senator Risa, when you offer the hug, I'm like, I don't need it as much as I did before. So dumarating ka rin pala sa point na yon, no? Na you get over it and you can actually speak about it in such a way that you hope it will empower another person and embolden another person to feel that you're not alone. You can speak about this and it will help another person. And thirdly, you can share your story so that others can learn from it. And also others to just help other people understand what you are going through. So your story is your power. Just as simple as that.
In my case, Lynn, I always wanted to describe myself as, perhaps I am a lawyer by profession, I am a teacher by passion, and a development worker by mission. And I believe that these three different platforms are very critical in amplifying the voices of the women that I have heard thus far from our Luna Legal Resource Center. So it's my commitment to use these different roles I have in order to elevate the discourse of women's empowerment and gender equality. It is my duty to educate the courts as well, because it's one of the highly patriarchal institutions that we have. As a teacher, it's my duty to teach my students how to conduct themselves and relate with one another, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, and even sex. And as a development worker, it is my mission also to ensure that women, especially those who do not have all the resources that they have in life to pursue their causes of action and find liberation from the bondage that kept them in the dark corners of their homes, na finally would see the light and would enjoy justice, no, na very elusive for them.
Thank you, Attorney Meong. And Senator Risa?
Oh, I shared already at the beginning. I'm just super enjoying all the sharing. Thank you so much, Miss Lynn, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. And Anna, thank you again for embracing all women in turn, from your survivorship and your strength.
Thank you. I love hearing from the young feminists. And when I say feminists, I mean both the young feminist men and the young feminist women. Because even parang, there's a new way of thinking. Things that I thought were acceptable or pabayaan mo na because I'm already like, okay, we've reached certain achievements already. Then the younger people come and they say, no, that's still wrong. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. So, young people, please, we love hearing your stories and introducing us to a new and better way of thinking and including others. Sometimes we need to take that cue from younger people.
Yes, agree.
Before we end this event and before we do our final takeaways, I want to invite back Isa and Ses, just so we could formally wrap up the conversation. First of all, let me just say really thank you. This has been such a learning moment for me, and I thought I already knew a lot coming into the conversation. But as I shared earlier, I think really my biggest takeaway is that I have to be more proactive, be more vigilant in embracing my sense of duty and responsibility, in making sure that this doesn't continue, right? Like, because again, there's that complacency added. Oh, my friends are empowered. We all come from this woke generation. We know what's wrong or not, but that's not true. Like, everybody goes through this, and to hear just the concrete experiences, the stories from the women. Really, this has been such an important learning experience for me. Thank you so much.
But just quickly, Miss Lynn, kasi na-provoke ako dun sa isang point mo. I do think your generation, the younger people, you do have something of an edge culturally. And so I think the challenge you can pose to long-standing economic and political systems can be unprecedented. Na hindi pa namin nagagawa sa generation namin. Kaya I'm really hoping in you. Like that.
Thank you po. Yeah. Rinig ko yan.
Lynn Pinugo for Senator po. Yan pambato namin, Sen. Ako lang yung kanyang mascot.
Ganda ng mascot ko,
Wow. May I just say thank you to Attorney Romeo, to Anna, and Senator Risa for being, being a voice for us today, for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, your knowledge. Anyone who watches this, okay, we are live here today, but anyone who watches this will surely be empowered to really take action in no matter how big or small that action is. I guess coming from a personal experience or after what happened to me in the hospital and knowing that every breath is a blessing, I think right now it is also important to make that breath count. So what do you do when you speak out, speak up, and make it count? Not just for yourself, but for others. Yeah.
Says, there was a question which I love and I want to pose it for you. How do you leverage Avon's massive network across the Philippines in order to continue generating more awareness and fighting against this?
Thanks, Lynn. Before I answer this last, I suppose this is the last question. Allow me to thank everyone in behalf of Avon, all our distinguished panelists, in joining us together with She Talks in discussing this topic amidst this pandemic. We really appreciate, we learned a lot from you, and we are actually inspired to do more events similar to this. And to answer the question, Lynn, since 2004, Avon has been preparing and conducting trainings and awareness program every year regarding this cause. And we wanted to reignite and strengthen that purpose. So we are strengthening partnership with our NGOs so that we can reach out to localities. Of course, during this time of pandemic, we are strengthening our social media arm so that we can reach out to young people, to millennials on how to address domestic violence. And also, we have our powerful representatives who are our arm also to reach out people nationwide in spreading the word on how women can seek help.
Thank you, Seth. Once again, I want to thank all our amazing panelists for joining us today and really for helping us, for helping educate everybody about this cause. As a final word, again, we are very grateful. She Talks Asia is very grateful to have partnered with Avon Philippines, who is very passionate about the cause, who is actually, investing a lot of resources in building the capacity of NGOs who are working toward this. And as a reflection on what Attorney Meong said, each one of us has a very unique power to help address this problem within our spheres of influence. You don't have to be an NGO lead. You don't be this amazing writer and you don't have to be a celebrity. You don't have to be a senator. You don't have to be a CSR lead to actually make a difference when it comes to this cause. It's just a matter of really embracing your responsibility and really doing whatever you can to help make this a safer space for women and children everywhere. Once again, thank you everybody. This has been She Talks Asia's first online tribe meetup. #Speak Out. Remember, you are isolated but not alone. Thank you so much again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Salamat. Mabuhay.
Thank you, Sen Risa. Thank you.